Meus senhores, boa tarde. Tenho que sair de um lado.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Welcome. I hope you heard the last part of our discussion, digital journalism. It also applies, in this case, to other types of journalism and entertainment. So I have my guest, Francisco Pedro Balsemão, CEO Imprensa, Luís Cunha Velho, Media Capital Member of the Board, and Nicolas Santos, RTP President. We're going to look at how digital is helping you, and so we're going to see to what extent that digital transform the business of journalism. Well, congratulations. It says non-stop. So that's an excellent question. So the two topics, the topic of contents and platforms, and the way we place our platforms digital. So we talked about digital for a long time now. There's nothing nothing new. And so digital is something which is unavoidable. It's the quickest way of people getting content, and perhaps an easiest way. So it changed the way of making business, and it's going to continue to change. We have to look at our market, and so our market is different, and so we look at Portugal, about 28% of advertising was digital. And so we look at other markets like the English, 55%, I believe, went for digital. So we have different speeds. And I think the major secret of this, if it is the secret, we have to know exactly the pace, as the media groups in this case, television. What is the rhythm or the pace that we want to speed up? So over a year and a half ago, we launched a platform, paid platform in Portugal called Optal. And we know that digital has many advantages. We have to test things. We have to have a complementarity between what is done today and we have to and on demand is inevitable. Is it profitable, or do we depend on a television like journalists to increase it digital? Yes, it's unavoidable. It's as far as to take this step for RTL, which is one of the biggest European media companies, has 2.2 million subscribers, which is significant. And in the budget for 2022, they said that instead of a break-even RTL Plus in 2005 into 25, so they're going to do this in 26. So this is a building, like I say, TV building. It's capital intensive and people intensive, streaming, but this is no novelty. We know that we are taking the right steps, and Opto is an example. There are many other examples too, and we don't have any radio, but we have 500,000 listeners who listen to our podcast. So up to what point does the newspaper be a reference? That started being a reference at the beginning of the group is Espresso, still a reference. The results are good, but in terms of paying subscribers, last year we managed to an average subscription of over 100,000 buyers, 50,000 on paper and 58,000 on digital subscribers. We're leaders not only totally but in the digital part. Espresso is an example of digital transition. So Mr. Cunha Velho. So same question for you, for the group you represent. This year we saw the entrance of a new product like CNN Portugal. Is this just another digital, or is it branding or a change of marketing. I think it's both things. The media has a very relevant role in the maintenance of democracy. So this is the first thing that we should refer to. And the distinction between opinion and journalism is critical for the maintenance of democracy, just as the public service we had a while ago. We had a debate a while ago, and more and more are we confirming what we invest in. Journalism is irreplaceable in the defense of democratic values. The weight of digital today is important, but note that digital today is seen at different levels. We have CNN, there was space for CNN, and so this was a channel that was launched. With part is transmitted through the channel. That's the digital part. That is CNN has two channels, two emissions, where the digital complements the CNN channel. Is absolutely important for us to reach all the objectives and audiences to complement the information. So the reader has more information and is informed to digital is the future. So I can imagine it's still early to take stock of the launch of CNN Portugal, but I would like to know whether you feel that it's a factor, an attraction factor. To use an international brand instead of using a Portuguese brand. We think that the brand was important, and we think there was space for a 24-hour information channel. So we've already got three, I believe the gentleman said, RTP3. CNN Portugal was a very good investment. There's space for it, and we think that there was space for it, but the option for an international model or an international chain, which is important, franchising. Did you think that this was better than the TV brand, Portuguese brand? It's an international brand, but the information is Portuguese. The information comes from all over the world. And so this is what the journalists understand as understand what information should be broadcast. And so we are talking about branding only. We're not talking about the content of the information. The content is something, it's completely different. It's Portuguese, which is transmitted, as I said, digitally and through the CNN, the normal CNN channel. Nicolau, when we talk about digital and an RTP, so we are often talking about the private paid digital groups, and so digital costs a lot of money. We've already said this. And in the case of RTP, it's open and free. So how do you deal with this, knowing that we have to have a different action in order to make this content digital? First of all, I would like to greet Mr. Carapuço and to highlight the importance of this Congress for this area for the media operators. So, as to what João was saying, I would like to begin by saying the following. I think that the operators that are here, just like other companies in this room, have certain difficulties, going through certain difficulties. That is, the energy costs have gone sky high. There are companies like ours where the energy costs are going to be very expensive at the end of the year. Inflation are bringing about an increase by our suppliers of 2 digits. And so sometimes they have the difficulties, and so when we ask for the equipment, it sometimes takes quite a long time arriving. And inflation is going to have an impact on the increases. Well, wages with the Ukrainian war is demanding a great effort from the three operators because you have to send teams, and so the private operators have kept people in the Ukraine. We have the advertising crisis, which has never recovered from 2008, and we have economic perspectives, which is not very rosy. And so we have fake news that we have to fight on a daily basis. So the digital model. Well, the digital question. I don't know whether people know that when we talk about RTP, there's always the idea that RTP is RTP1. Well, RTP is a group which at this moment has 8 TV channels, 7 radio channels. It has digital and has multimedia. Now, this is a very overwhelming world. We consider that it's our Netflix, which is RTP Play, where there's a huge content, all free of charge, games, etc. We have RTP Arena and RTP, music. I forgot. RTP POC, where we have we show a number of live concerts. And so we have a variety of viewers. So different viewers can be interested. But with regard to digital, we're talking about it's free. In the case of the private, paid users isn't. Well, the problem, and I worked in the Immersive group for many years. This was the analog economy. It would be greater than the digital one, but you pay less than you pay in the other. And so from my point of view, it's good taking into account that when we talk about foreign examples where there was certain success or a great deal of success in these areas, but also certain failures, we have to remember what digital is in order for it to be profitable. We have to think of the scale. Now, our scale in Portugal is less than any other site, any other newspaper that writes in English or that is included in a strong economy like the German, Japanese, Spanish, etc. So our target is relatively low. In terms of revenue, that's not easy. So, as you know, we receive support from the state in order to comply with our different missions. RTP receives this support. It is included in the audiovisual rate, and so it's based on this that we make it. So so what we produce should be broadcast free of charge. And before moving on, in terms of another topic, is there still the idea of the economy, digital economy, and the other economy, in terms of the way you manage your business. So if it does exist, it shouldn't exist, because so to convey the message through administrations and who's running the company, there shouldn't be a differentiation, and this is people working in media groups and journalists. They can't just do television, just do digital. Have to do both. It is obvious, because even if we say analog is fighting digital, digital always going to win, because we have a connected TV, smart TV, and we know the distribution is going to be digital. And so it's going to prevail over the rest sooner or later. And so we have to go back and think that everything we produce also has to be digital and has to be focused on this type of consumption. So all of us work in television, and the obligation to look at the audiences in the morning, or the rates in the morning, and I was looking at see who won, who, etc., etc. But that is a big. We can see what the audience rate of each channel is, and so it's amazing that with streaming, it is becoming smaller and smaller, and goes to the media groups in Portugal. So the question is, platforms like Netflix, HBO Plus, Disney Plus, that are emerging more and more, where they're threatening the business and how the business has to transform in order not to lose out. Well, first of all, the way the audience are measured in this slice that we call others, it's becoming bigger and bigger. And so we have a subscription, and we have a number of channels, cable channels, and the others don't discriminate exactly what it is. It could be on a console or using it free of charge streaming. Their service could be HBO or up and so. This, as I was saying a while ago, this can be seen as a threat and an opportunity. And so this is if we position ourselves in correctly and with calm, and so we must make sure that we're not going to eat each other up, then this will have to be a threat and not an opportunity. We have to see what our strategic objectives are, and we're revising our actual plan, and we're making a revision because of what you were saying as well. And so there's a great competition, not only with my colleagues here on my left, and there's going to continue to be, which is wonderful, but there are going to be other forms of competition, not only those, and so we have to look at the fact that one day there must be so many, the day only had so many hours, and so we're not in the pandemic, so we'll stream it. The data's not clear yet, but and so, given what you said at the beginning, this is a battle, not a disloyal battle, but between a great streaming in English that can have a global audience and a Portuguese streaming that has got the Portuguese-speaking public. The battle is very difficult. So how we get over this, put the content in English. I think there's space for all of them. We are positioned as a service, like Netflix, which is going to have to complement this with Portuguese content, and so like HBO, Disney Plus has got to do with the contents. And so we have to quality content. So television nowadays is not the television we had in the past because of digital. Not only televisions are going to continue to be. So first of all, a regulated environment. This is very important. People don't realise how important this is, but the fact it is regulated, it's brand safe, and it's bringing the brands another type of security that doesn't exist in other media means. And so the fact that it's regulated makes a huge difference. And the fact that it's run by professionals or somebody who picks up a camera and makes a video shows that there is a care, there's a filter. And so this investment in quality, and so it's going to be Seca up to 3.0. I think Portuguese contents for those who live in Portugal, and the two channels of soaps, which have millions of viewers every day, address Portuguese issues. So there can be different type of approach and optimal, but the quality content in terms of information and the news. We like to. We have an hour. You have an hour and a half. I think an hour is enough. But I understand if there is an audience for an hour and a half, why not? Give the news Portuguese like information. We said Luís Cunha Velho, the CNN International launched CNN Plus, which is paid, and so a month later that had to be closed because it just wasn't viable. We know the reasons, but it was a project that was publicized and then had to stop. So if it's very difficult for CNN International to do this, so in Capital, no, this is just an example. So in Capital, we have a TV player that goes all over the world, and other sites where digital is included. And as you well know, it has significant audiences. On the other hand, so what we implement in Media Capital is to produce content thinking of the two aspects, so that is emission and digital. And this has been done with very positive results. And so when you spoke about the Portuguese language is a difficulty, but we mustn't forget that that the Media Capital Fiction, TVE, plural, is spread all over the world. In addition to have a channel in Portugal only with fiction, we have fiction contents, or original contents, or this model as well. I'm talking about paid. Up to what extent can it be paid? It has to be a mixture. We have to know exactly what is the market that we have and what is the ratio. And so I think that the ability to have both aspects, paid and non-paid, should be questioned and tested, and we have to move forward to find out exactly what are the advantage of totally paid and paid and premium, and then the one that's totally free. So I gave you the example of CNN International, not because CNN Portugal, but because an emblematic example of how the business failed in streaming. And we're talking about international giants, and so that is why. So what lessons can be learned from this? How are we going to confront digital and television with the costs that it has, especially in television, and to maintain it later, and so we can have access to the rest. And so we're going to try and do what I just said. That is when you produce content, that is when the content appears. It is not thought to be shown just on a channel for the two forms, channel and digital. And as I said here, so if it's only digital and it produces only for digital, then obviously digital in terms of scale, there's no profitability yet. But we are going fast. Technology is going really fast, and tomorrow, who knows, maybe we'll have the digital Portuguese digital platforms that is of Capital with different products spoken in different languages, so they can be accessible to people who are all over the world. And so this is paid channel by channel, etc.
Nicolas, as chair of RTP, and your experience as a journalist in economy, how have you progressed from streaming to the traditional business of the media in Portugal? How do you fight against the growth we've spoken about, the disruption, how to be disruptive on television, to be able to confront the challenges of streaming? Well, if you can't beat them, join them, they say. So it's interesting that it's possible nowadays to have content that will go from the traditional areas of journalist television, but then may have a large impact on streaming and the social media. What has been done recently, the soap operas, there was one that had a great success among the younger people, This exists not only on the screen, but you can see it on RTP Play or through the social media. This can be beneficial, and we're trying to, from this viewpoint, establish alliances with Netflix, with HBO, with the Spanish television RTV, with the television of Galicia. We're carrying out products with international partners to help our products. Something that could be interesting. We've had genres as the pivot for theatre. We had a series called Planet A, which was a co-production with the Gulbenkian Foundation, and it is precisely about the problems that our planet has. And planet is A, there is no planet B. This is one of the news. There are several interviews in English too, but we ought to foster this. And certainly, well, that's a part, the collaboration part, but I was thinking about the other side, the prime time, from 8, 9 to 10 in the evening. In Portugal, it was the major broadcasters. Now we have streaming. How is streaming threatening this? I'm not talking about collaboration. How do you confront this turn? It's not easy. It's not easy. Because the younger people have become disconnected from watching television in the traditional way, and they prefer streaming more because they want to find what they want. Sometimes just for entertainment. There may be people who are playing around or doing other things. Of course, that's why one thing that Francisco said, and that's the audience ratings. We have areas that are not traditional areas, but we might have audiences that are not being yet measured. We have more audiences than there really are, or that are recorded. I mean, the industry is changing very quickly. I think the right business model has not been found yet. For some years now, a group of journalists of the United States went. They're starting with the digital, and something that we had from the Americans is what the business model is. And the business model for streaming and for the digital era depends a lot on the scaling. The scaling is essential. Yes, but we talked about the world scale of CNN Plus, but it fell. It's not really necessary to have the scale. We must have certain products that may fit or not be agreeable, and this has also been referred to during the previous round table, and that's that there's less loyalty to brands. There are generations that are not loyal to their brands, and people that used to buy the newspaper Expresso since 1933, well, these are older people now. Well, we could speak the same about RTP. Yes. We have loyal audiences, of course, with some compliments from the people that watch us. But I insist again, the younger generations nowadays, when they think about RTP, they're going to actually watch RTP Play or RTP Arena, and they must find something that is adapted to their likings. Just in a nutshell, I understand the question, and as he said, there's no one magic solution for this. With Netflix, as you know, the results are not being good for ratings, but it's not a question of losing money. I mean, it's 0.001% fall in audience ratings. The investors wanted the perfect thing, and that doesn't exist. There's more room to grow. That's not happening in other countries. But we could also test other kinds of models. A year and something ago, Netflix tested a new kind of channel in France. And as you know, they're going to start charging for advertising like HBO. So as you know, this they know that it's not only what they do now that is going to be replaced. I was convinced that there's no secret in this. It's this complementarity. We have ITV, ITVX that is going to start broadcasting series. And they're going to invest across the board. I don't know if it's going to be a success or not, but I'm sure that there will be complementarity. I'm sure that some of the people, or the same people, when they get home, if they don't feel like looking around in Netflix what they're going to watch today, they want to have the freedom of choice instead of freedom from choice. So we have freedom of choice for some people. Other people want freedom from choice. They don't want to be bothered by having to see what kind of thing they're going to watch on television. We may be also seeing that this new business is a transition from one generation to the next. That is also see this problem. And some people expect certain things to be on television. And to what extent the younger generations are being shooed away, so to speak, from watching television. Yes, we ought to look at the figures, and we speak somewhat intuitively. We're speaking for an audience that it might be a bit of an elite audience. There are other countries with different ways of approaching things. The figures say that even the younger generations, during lockdown, a lot of people started watching the news that they'd never watched before. I'm speaking about the younger generations. And other people watch the soap operas. And they try and watch the next episode of the series. I look around and, well, it's also a generational thing. The millennials are different. The millennials are used to not pay for things. Then we have the Z generation that are paying for Spotify. But are people willing to pay for watching television? There are differences between generations. Some are aware that they need to pay if they want quality, but the millennials were not exactly thinking the same. On the younger generations, well, when I was in my 20s, well, perhaps I would have had Netflix. And my children, when they grow up, they're going to perhaps feel the same. It all depends on the content and the platform. I think streaming is here to stay. Streaming is here to stay. The players are not many more. There are several players, but we can watch the same content on different platforms. What we think important is content. And Francisco had just reminded us of something that is important for the people here and the people at home. Any soap opera on prime time will have 1 million viewers in a normal situation. But my question is, what is the content of Netflix, or what is the content of streaming in Portugal with 1 million viewers? Well, it's free, but Netflix, you have to pay for it. Well, that's not necessarily the issue. I mean, you have to pay for access to the net. Well, I may have cable TV, but I have to pay for Netflix. And most certainly, you won't have 1 million people watching. This is essential because we still have, and there is plenty of room in Portugal for content in Portuguese. There is room in Portugal to have good content, and there is room in Portugal to think about differentiated content that can be exported. It's obvious that in Portugal, as you said a while ago, we are somewhat limited. We're limited, namely the two of us, regarding institutions. Nicolau, fortunately or unfortunately for us, has the support of the state. But the two of us, yes, that would give us for another discussion. Well, we have publicity. What we need to find are recipes for us to be able to produce content that is effectively different, and which content may enable us to viabilize the company and viabilize the workers therein, and to grow we have this need to change the business. If younger generations are watching television differently, would this need a change in the business model? Well, maybe yes. If our population is aging, we have a generation group that will be watching, but we have also younger people. How can we approach them? New content, yes, but new content is not enough. We have new content, but to offset for these generations and finding interesting content, I believe that we need to have a critical mass in Portugal to do it. But we have other issues, which are issues of how the content is seen and how the content is going to be measured in order for all the economic impact to have a result. I believe, and the group that I belong to believes too, that there is a capacity to find new audiences and to develop new ideas, to find other audiences, but never forgetting that in Portugal, the market is the way it is, and that we have to open up the market to the international audiences. Well, there's always the issue of funding from the state, funding for the business, but RTP is not a business, and it gets funding from the state, but it has other obligations. And I ask, how, with such obligations, can we achieve during this transformation in which the way television is watched with the same funding, or perhaps with less funding? Because how can you manage to do that? It's not easy. You need a lot of imagination and a lot of perseverance and a lot of dedication, and you need to find talent in the company and try and find it. Also, RTP has the audiovisual contribution, but just in order for you to have an idea, I think the colleagues at the panel may allow me to say this. The RTP is doing more for independent producers, producing series, films, and documentaries than our partners. We're investing almost 15 million each year to support our directors and artists. And this is a part of our contract. Then we have, for instance, to be together with the migrant communities and with people that live in Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa, and also with the African community in Portugal, which is also important. And we're developing the multimedia era. We're concerned about it because we think that many companies are in a transition of a more traditional industry that is more analogic to digital. I don't know if this is the million-dollar question, but how can you provide a public service for the future without being a media business? In other words, how do you evolve, and how are we going to have a public service that is so much conditioned, and what are the obligations? Well, if we look at RTP's concession contract and we were to cut down all the obligations, the last one to remain, which is the first and foremost, it's information. Rigorous information that is impartial, that is timely. That's the essential goal for which the group RTP exists, either the radio or the television. That's what is the first and foremost obligation, to contribute towards Portuguese society, to contribute towards Portuguese democracy with the right information. And so do our partners. I don't mean that you're not doing it. But within RTP's remit, this is the number one. And obviously all that has to do with entertainment, with documentaries, with support to independent producers, with the country's cohesion from an information viewpoint. That's why we are also present on the islands and all across the country, and also abroad. So this is something that issues from our contract. Since the Minister of Culture said yesterday, when he was called to the Parliament, we would have to revisit the concession contract that was agreed with the previous government, the previous Secretary of State, but they are intending to revisit it. I think it's the right time to start reflecting on what the future of public services ought to be. We have a set of obligations in our contract, but RTP does a lot more than that. In the social world, we support many campaigns for social solidarity, to support many artists and to promote artists, Portuguese artists, things that are not necessarily in the concession contract. But every year we have one football match for our migrant communities and for the Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa. We're not obliged to do this, but there are a series of mandates that we have for, and that's part of our contract. I think it's time to do something about it. In the private sector, you don't have the state funding. It depends on advertising and consumption at a time, and Nicolas just said, in which electricity is becoming more expensive, and there are large audiences, but you need to invest more because of the war. So how do you manage the business to attract more investors in the national media sector?
How do you attract them? I think, as you know, our main source of revenue is advertising, 62%. And so from this percentage, most of it comes from the television section, that general sick. And once again, that actually shows that, as I've been saying up to now, and I'm convinced of, is that in Portugal, the television, the analog television is still important, because the advertisers continue to invest in a generalist television. 61% of advertising in Portugal was in generalist televisions and cable. So this is more than half of the market is television. So how do you attract us to this investment to digital? So we don't know what the secret is. So if this is the business of the future, how are we going to attract them as advertising to digital? First of all, as has already been said, we have to operate in multi-platforms, and this is fundamental. So each one of the countries, companies, has to have this training. These skills have to be developed within each one of our companies in order to understand that it is no longer analog, no longer digital. So how do we attract more advertisers for this, for our different channels? In the case of the television, there is no means that gets to people so quickly. So the television, that is, and so in terms of awareness and mass media campaigns, this is the right channel. And so we have to show that among our brands of information, etc., which are quality brands, And the other groups are represented have quality brands too. In ours, said, the television is brand safe, but digital is also brand safe, meaning that we have to transpose this the security from analog to digital, and we have to convert. So the context is important, and to show that our advertisers, and some of them will be present here, and there's a world of the GAFA who have a lot of assets, but we have direct access to our users. So we can use this data in order to so we have to make sure how the metrics are used. So for the groups, the group that is in place, how do you use these data to improve the groups? So within the rules, is this an important source? We must realize that digital, we didn't talk about this a while ago, but one of the most important thing is that digital brings us this information directly, and there's no intermediation. So we have the best of both worlds in digital. So we have this data within the rules, the applicable rules. So we use the data. Our advertisers know who is watching our content, and with the advantage that within a very safe environment with quality brands, and I'm talking about Expresso Six Noticias, and so it's different than having another service of platforms, no names mentioned, that doesn't have the safety, security. So there's a great opportunity. So just let me add something in relation to this. I don't think it's possible to sponsor information contents in the digital. Buy. So I didn't say sponsored. I said because in relation to the brands, I'm talking about sponsorships, the brands are much more available for somebody who becomes famous and promotes a certain product than hearing about the war in Ukraine. I was working for EF, for example. So there's no brand available for this. So we're finding people who have developed their platforms, their sites, etc., and then after a certain time that they become so famous that the brands going to take them, or they're bought by bigger media groups. And so there's a drama here because the information is crucial for any one of the operators here. It is truly the alpha and omega for these communication groups to exist, but in the digital part, it's very difficult to find somebody available to sponsor or to buy these contents. In general, I think there's error. TV Media Capital is already a success and already made great content, entertainment, and CNN Portugal was a big event. It's a major investment. So up to what extent does this can this investment bring a return? And so that is whether this is the idea. And I think above all, the legislator and all of us, operators and all those intervening, have to think that we are in 2022, but no longer in 2002. So, following all the rules, there's a lot of legislation that is still active and doesn't make much sense. So I know the European Parliament and the government has moved forward a great deal in terms of revision 2018. We're talking about quite legislation that doesn't make any sense. For example, just as Nicola ended up by saying, I can't sponsor an information channel, a sports program. So does that make sense? So when I am sort of broadcasting a football game and the whole stadium is full of advertising, so does it make sense to sponsor a war report? That's different. So what Nicola said, these are the advertisers that don't want to be in the middle of the war, or they don't want to sponsor the war. We are talking about advertising which can be seen normally. And note, we mustn't forget, and allow me to say this because for us it's very important, we are competitors. We're good friends. So we're good friends. And we have an excellent relationship. One thing is the core business on a daily basis. The other thing is outside. What happens outside the core business? It is very difficult for us not to have source of revenue. There's the ability to find additional revenue that allows us in this aspect. As I said a while ago, there's legislation that is changing, and I believe that it's going to change if we look at the reality, because as I said right at the beginning, the media groups are vital for democracy. We all agree on this. But some are benefited and not others. There is no difference. We're talking about business, but here there's a huge difference. I would just like to say something. This is, I think it's a very important. Medicapital produces about 1,000 hours of fiction a year, which uses hundreds of actors, hundreds of technicians, hundreds of directors, creatives, and so we mustn't forget how the machine is assembled, and how nowadays this culture, these people, for example, if it ceases to exist, they should. And how will this will survive? I'd like a very quick answer because we don't have much time. For Play Empresa was resisted to an attack by pirates. So is this a problem today? So what lesson do you take this when we talk about technology, digital? We have greater vulnerabilities very quickly. There's a problem for all media groups, retail, health. So how do they confront this after this very concrete example they had? Well, as media has, as Jean said, we don't know what the reason underlying this attack. We still don't know. The result was this. That was to try and to destroy a media group. In terms of lessons, very quickly, prevention, reaction, transformation, prevention. That is, we must have B plans. In terms of vulnerabilities, accesses, backups, this is fundamental. Since our attack, and since all the companies have woke up. And so we must have done this, the same thing, reaction to have plans in case the worst happens. The reaction is to know how we're going to react, and so we must be focused on what happened. Transformation, because this isn't a question of ITA, this is a topic of all who work on the company, and so we must be aware that we so we must have the journalists from IT are absolutely fundamental, and so a part of the company is based on this. It changed because of this. It changed. We have a score in this area. So we'll see what's going to happen. How do you prepare yourself for this? So even if we make contingency plans, security, and so technology can help us resolve some questions. So there was an article published, created by a journalist with no identification of its source. It was taken out. We have to have more cybersecurity. We have to move forward even more because we're beginning to question the right to information. In this case, disinformation and the lack of confidentiality, or breaking confidentiality. So without this, we won't be able to make good journalism in Portugal. We're making contingency plans, but they still fall short of what they should be. This happened by a week ago, 2 weeks ago. It's very important because it questions all the information, it questions everything that we are doing, and all the trusts entrusted in us. Nicolau, same question for the RTP group. Being a public service can attract cyber attacks of this type. We were already developing, and I believe that our colleagues were also doing this. We were developing security and protection systems. What happened was that we speeded this up. I would like to say that this was this event was very harsh for the company. From my point of view, there was something positive. I think that from RTP and the TV, there was immediate availability to be able to use our structures to continue the broadcast. And RTP was, it ended up by not happening, but it's very important to point this out. Yes, this availability, the solidarity was very important in the sector. So when we are in a situation, in the case of RTP, of a public company founded in 1957 and has a memory of a country for many years until private operators appeared and they started to accumulate this memory, for us it's absolutely fundamental to have a very great security in relation to our archives especially, which many people resort to now with the commemorations of the 50 years of the 25th of April. We've had also the directors, academics who have been using RTP in addition to the normal system devoted to our archives. So we're accelerating this, and I have said, we are not safe from anything, but every week we have to change passwords. I know. Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and we're going to move on, and hopefully that the media business is going to continue to be democratic and part of freedom.